The wind howled across the tarmac of the Aspen private airfield, biting through layers of wool and fur. Captain Davis Thorne stood by the stairs of the gleaming $75 million Bombardier Global 7500, checking his watch with a sneer. He saw a black woman approaching, dressed in a heavy nondescript parka and worn boots, and immediately blocked her path. He told her the cleaning crew was supposed to be done an hour ago and ordered her to the back jump seat if she wanted a ride. He didn't know that the cleaning lady was Dr. Angela Vance, and he definitely didn't know she was the one signing his paychecks. What happened next wasn't just a firing. It was a masterclass in karma. Christmas Eve at Aspen-Pitkin County Airport, ASE, is a parade of wealth that borders on the obscene. The tarmac at Atlantic Aviation was a parking lot of heavy metal Gulfstream, G650s Dassault Falcons, and the undisputed king of the ramp, the Bombardier Global 7500 tail number N880EV. Captain Davis Thorne smoothed the lapel of his uniform, checking his reflection in the polished glass of the cockpit window. He was a handsome man, in a conventional, rigid way, square-jawed, silver-haired, with the posture of a man who believed the world revolved around his flight plan. He had flown commercial for 20 years before moving to private aviation. He liked private better. The whiskey was older, the clientele was richer, and the deference he received was absolute. "Cabin is prepped, Captain," Sarah, the lead flight attendant, said, poking her head out of the main door. She was young, barely 25, and terrified of Thorne. He had a reputation for getting crew members blacklisted for insubordination, which usually meant they didn't laugh at his jokes. "Good." Thorne barked, the steam of his breath rising in the frigid Colorado air. "The owner is sending a proxy today. Some tech executive from the San Francisco holding company. I want everything perfect. We need to impress this guy. I hear the owner, this E. Vance, is looking to upgrade the fleet. I want to be the chief pilot on the new supersonics." "Understood, Captain. Champagne is on ice. Caviar is plated." Thorne nodded and walked down the air stairs to the tarmac to do a final exterior walk around. The sun was setting behind the Rockies, casting long purple shadows over the snowbanks. A black SUV pulled up to the gate, but it wasn't the sleek Cadillac Escalade usually reserved for VIPs. It was a local taxi, a battered Chevy Suburban with salt stains on the fenders. Thorne frowned. Security let a cab through. The back door opened and a woman stepped out. She didn't look like a tech executive. She certainly didn't look like the VIPs Thorne was used to ferrying men in Loro Piana cashmere coats or women dripping in Van Cleef diamonds. This woman was black, in her late 30s, wearing a puffy, oversized North Face coat that had seen better days, thick wool socks and heavy Timberland boots. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she dragged a duffel bag out of the trunk herself. Thorne watched her approach with a mixture of confusion and irritation. He checked his manifest. Dr. E. Vance, +2 guests. He intercepted her at the bottom of the air stairs, his arm shooting out to block the handrail. "Hold it right there," Thorne said, his voice cutting through the wind. The woman looked up. She had striking eyes, calm and deep, but currently rimmed with the exhaustion of a chaotic holiday week. "Excuse me." "Deliveries go to the FBO front desk, not the aircraft," Thorne said dismissively, gesturing back toward the terminal building. "We're preparing for a high-priority departure. I don't have time for catering mix-ups." The woman blinked, a small, amused smile playing on her lips. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. "I'm not catering, Captain. I'm the passenger." Thorne let out a short, sharp laugh. He looked her up and down, making a show of inspecting her attire. "Lady, this is a Global 7500. It costs $15,000 an hour just to keep the engines idling. The charter manifest lists a Dr. Vance and senior associates from Helix Dynamics. I don't see a doctor. I see someone who looks like she got lost on the way to the bus station." "I am Dr. Vance," she said quietly. "Angela Vance." Thorne hesitated for a split second. The name matched, but the image didn't. In his world, bias was a survival mechanism. He profiled passengers to know who to suck up to and who to ignore. This woman didn't fit the profile. She looked like the help. "Right," Thorne sneered, dropping the pretense of politeness. "Look, I don't know who you slept with or who you're assisting to get a seat on this flight, but let's get one thing straight. I run this ship. I don't like late arrivals and I don't like sloppy attire. It reflects poorly on the operation." Angela's smile faded. The temperature between them dropped lower than the aspen air. "My attire is for comfort. It's a 5-hour flight to New York, and I'm not late. It's 4:00 p.m. "You're early," Thorne corrected aggressively, "which is just as annoying. Fine, get on board, but stow that bag in the cargo hold. I don't want that dirty thing cluttering up the main cabin." "It's a carry-on. It has my laptop," Angela said, her voice hardening slightly. "I said check it." Thorne stepped closer, towering over her. "Or you can walk to New York. Your choice." Angela held his gaze. For a moment, Thorne felt a flicker of unease. There was something in her posture, a stillness that wasn't fear. It was the stillness of a predator watching prey make a mistake. "Fine," she said softly. She handed the bag to the ground handler standing nearby, who looked embarrassed by the captain's behavior. "Handle it with care, please. Up the stairs," Thorne commanded, pointing a gloved finger. "And try not to track mud on the carpet. It's custom wool from New Zealand." Angela walked up the stairs, her boots thudding softly on the metal. As she reached the top, she paused and looked back at Thorne. "Captain Thorne, isn't it?" she asked. "That's right," he said, puffing out his chest. "Captain Davis Thorne, veteran of the skies. Remember it." "Oh, I will," Angela whispered to herself as she stepped into the warmth of the cabin. "I definitely will." The interior of the Bombardier Global 7500 was a sanctuary of beige leather, mahogany veneer, and gold accents. It was divided into 4 living zones: a club suite, a conference suite, an entertainment suite, and a private bedroom at the rear. It was a flying palace. Angela stepped inside, exhaling as the warmth hit her face. Sarah, the flight attendant, was arranging a vase of white orchids on the dining table. When she saw Angela, she didn't sneer. She smiled, though her eyes darted nervously toward the cockpit entrance. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," Sarah said, offering a hot towel on a silver tray. "Can I take your coat?" "Thank you," Angela said, peeling off the bulky North Face parka. Underneath, she wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans. Expensive, but understated. It's been a long week. "I can imagine. Aspen at Christmas is madness," Sarah said kindly. "Can I get you a drink before the other passengers arrive? We have Dom Perignon 2012, or I can make you a coffee." "Just sparkling water with lime, please," Angela said. She walked past the first row of seats and headed toward the mid-cabin conference group. This was her favorite spot. It had the widest table, perfect for working. She sat down in the forward-facing seat on the right, the master seat, usually reserved for the principal flyer. She pulled a tablet out of her oversized purse and began reviewing quarterly reports. A few minutes later, heavy footsteps thudded up the stairs. Captain Thorne entered the cabin, followed by 2 men. These were the guests Angela had approved: Julian Sterling and Bradley Croft. They were venture capitalists looking to invest in her biotech firm, Helix Dynamics. They were dressed in sharp suits, loud and already laughing about the ski bunnies they had met at the lodge. "Gentlemen, welcome aboard the flagship," Thorne boomed his voice, dripping with the sycophantic charm he had denied Angela. "Make yourselves at home. We have a flight time of 4 hours and 40 minutes to Teterboro." Julian Sterling, a man with a fake tan and blindingly white teeth, looked around the cabin. "Nice bird, Captain. Very nice, though I expected the owner to be here to greet us. Dr. Vance is around, Thorne said, waving his hand vaguely. He spotted Angela sitting in the conference group. His face darkened. He marched over to her. Excuse me? Thorne said, his voice low but laced with menace. Angela didn't look up from her tablet. Yes, Captain. You are in the wrong seat. Angela paused, tapping the screen. She slowly raised her eyes. I'm sorry. That is the principal seat, Thorne hissed, leaning down so the two men wouldn't hear. That seat controls the cabin, lighting the temperature and the entertainment. It is reserved for the VIP, not for associates. I'm comfortable here, Angela said calmly. And the controls are intuitive. I think I can manage. It's not about whether you can manage, Thorne snapped. It's about protocol. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Croft are distinguished guests. They need the conference space to discuss business. You need to move. There are 6 seats in this conference group, Captain. They can sit across from me. Thorne's face turned a shade of crimson. He grabbed the armrest of her chair. Listen to me, you arrogant little... He caught himself glancing back at Julian and Bradley, who were settling into the front club seats and pouring themselves champagne. I am the captain of this vessel. My word is law. You are disrupting the balance of the cabin. I want you in the rear. The rear? Angela asked, raising an eyebrow. The divan in the bedroom suite, or the jump seat in the galley. I don't care. But get out of the boss's chair. Angela looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the fear behind the arrogance. He was terrified that these 2 men in suits, who he perceived as the real power, would be offended by the presence of a casually dressed black woman in the power seat. He was trying to curate an aesthetic of exclusivity, and she was ruining his picture. Captain, Angela said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. I am asking you to reconsider this order. You are making a mistake based on assumptions. Do not move me. I'm not asking, Thorne spat. I'm ordering. Move. Now, or I will have security escort you off the plane for failing to comply with crew instructions. And don't think I won't do it. I've thrown off people way more important than you. Angela stared at him for 3 long seconds. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Sarah, standing by the galley, looked like she was about to cry. She made a small motion with her hand, silently begging Angela to just move to avoid a scene. Angela closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stood up. Fine, she said. Thorne smirked a triumphant, ugly look. Good decision. The back. Now. Angela gathered her purse and her tablet. She walked past the confused gazes of Julian and Bradley. Hey, sweetheart, Julian called out, holding up his empty glass. While you're up, tell the stewardess we need a refill. Yeah. Angela stopped. She looked at Julian, then at Thorne, who was nodding approvingly at Julian's disrespect. I'm not the stewardess, Angela said dryly. Whatever, Julian laughed, turning back to Bradley. Diversity hires, am I right? Thorne chuckled along with them. Apologies, Mr. Sterling. We'll get that sorted. Angela walked to the very back of the plane, past the gold-plated bathroom, into the aft bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, the engines whining to life outside. She could feel the vibration of the Rolls-Royce Pearl 15 engines spooling up. She pulled out her phone. She had 1 bar of signal left before they took off. She opened her secure email app and composed a message. It wasn't to her assistant. It was to the CEO of the aviation management firm that operated this jet, a man named Robert Halloway. Subject urgent. Incident on N880 EV body. Robert, I am currently on my aircraft. Your lead pilot, Captain Thorne, just ordered me out of my own seat because he assumed I was an assistant. He is also allowing guests to verbally harass me. I am observing for now. But have the legal team on standby at Teterboro, and tell HR to have termination papers ready. We are going to have a staff meeting when we land." She hit send just as the plane lurched forward. Up in the cockpit, Captain Thorne throttled up, feeling like a king. He had put the uppity woman in her place, charmed the rich guys, and was about to fly a $75 million jet. It was going to be a good Christmas. He had no idea that he had just locked himself in a metal tube at 45,000 feet with the woman who owned the very seat he was sitting in. At 45,000 feet, the sky was a bruised purple, fading into the pitch black of the stratosphere. Inside the cabin of N880EV, however, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and spilled champagne. Angela sat in the rear bedroom suite, the door cracked open just an inch. She had her laptop open, monitoring the flight path via the plane's internal Wi-Fi, which she, as the owner, had admin access to. She watched the altitude hold steady, but the noise from the main cabin was getting louder. Julian Sterling and Bradley Croft had decided that the flight was an extension of their frat days at Wharton. They had opened a second bottle of Dom Perignon and were currently throwing pretzels at each other, trying to catch them in their mouths. Sarah, the flight attendant, looked exhausted. She was trying to maintain the veneer of five-star service while being treated like a cocktail waitress in a dive bar. "Honey, get me another one," Julian slurred, waving his empty flute. "And make it snappy. We're losing hydration here." "Sir, we are beginning to run low on the chilled vintage," Sarah said politely, her hands trembling slightly. "Perhaps some water." "Water is for poor people." Bradley laughed, slapping the armrest. "Go check the back. I bet the help back there is hoarding the good stuff." Angela tightened her grip on her iPad. She wasn't just annoyed anymore. She was insulted. This was her sanctuary. She had designed this plane to be a flying office, a place of peace. These men were desecrating it. Then the smell hit her, acrid and unmistakable. Cigarette smoke. Angela stood up immediately. Smoking on a private jet, especially one with custom silk wall coverings, was a cardinal sin. It wasn't just about the smell. It was a safety hazard, and it destroyed the resale value of the interior. She pushed the bedroom door open and marched into the main cabin. Julian had a lit cigarette in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. He was ashing onto the carpet, the custom New Zealand wool carpet Captain Thorne had been so worried about Angela muddying. "Put that out," Angela said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the engines like a razor. Julian looked up, squinting through the haze. "Oh, look who's back, the stowaway." "Relax, sweetheart. The captain said we can do whatever we want. The captain doesn't own this plane," Angela snapped. "And federal aviation regulations prohibit smoking. Put it out. Now." "Ooh, she's feisty," Bradley jeered. "I like feisty." Just then, the cockpit door opened. Captain Thorne stepped out, looking annoyed. He adjusted his tie and scanned the cabin. He saw the smoke. He saw the ash on the carpet. Angela looked at him, expecting him to finally do his job. "Captain Thorne, your passengers are smoking. They are damaging the interior and violating FAA rules. Handle this." Thorne looked at the cigarette. Then he looked at Julian, who gave him a conspiratorial wink. "It's just a little celebration, Captain," Julian said, slipping a $100 bill from his money clip and leaving it on the table. "We're celebrating the Helix deal. Don't be a buzzkill like her." Thorne looked at the money, then at Angela. The choice was clear in his eyes. He chose the men in the suits. He chose the illusion of power. He turned to Angela, his face twisting into a scowl. "You are disrupting the flight again." Angela was stunned. "Excuse me, they are burning the cabin." "Mr. Sterling is a valued client." Thorne lied smoothly. "The ventilation system can handle a little smoke. What I can't handle is a hysterical woman in the back creating a hostile environment." "Hysterical," Angela repeated the word, tasting like bile. "You heard me?" Thorne stepped into her personal space, using his height to intimidate her. "I told you to stay in the jump seat. If you come out here one more time and harass these gentlemen, I will divert this flight to Kansas City, dump you on the tarmac, and have the local police arrest you for interfering with a flight crew. Do you understand me?" Sarah gasped from the galley. "Captain, she's right, the FAA rules." "Quiet, Sarah." Thorne barked, not looking away from Angela. "Unless you want to be looking for a job at Spirit Airlines tomorrow, you'll shut your mouth and pour the gentlemen their drinks." He turned back to Angela, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Last warning. Get back in your hole." Angela looked at the cigarette burn forming on the beige leather armrest next to Julian. She looked at Sarah's terrified face, and finally she looked at Davis Thorne, a man so blinded by his own bias that he was digging his own grave with both hands. "Kansas City won't be necessary, Captain," Angela said, her voice eerily calm. "We're going to Teterboro, and when we land, I assure you the police will be involved, but not for me." "Empty threats from a nobody," Thorne scoffed. "Go." Angela turned and walked back to the bedroom. She closed the door and locked it. She sat on the bed, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She picked up the cabin phone handset. It was a closed system, usually used to call the cockpit or the galley. But as the owner, she knew the override codes to access the satellite communications, directly bypassing the cockpit entirely. She dialed a number. "Operations, this is dispatch," a voice answered crisply. It was Atlantic Aviation's headquarters in Teterboro. "This is Angela Vance," she said. "Authorization code Alpha Zulu 77 Victor." There was a pause, followed by the sound of furious typing. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly from professional to reverent. "Dr. Vance, we weren't expecting a direct call. Is everything all right with the flight? We show you arriving in 2 hours." "No, everything is not all right," Angela said. "I have a security situation on board. I need you to contact the FAA and the Port Authority Police at Teterboro. I want a reception team waiting at the hangar." "Of course, ma'am. Is the aircraft in danger?" "The aircraft is being damaged by passengers, but the primary issue is the crew. I am initiating a code black on the flight deck." "Code black, ma'am, that means—" "It means the pilot is compromised and unfit to fly due to gross negligence and insubordination," Angela said, cold ply. "I am not relieving him of command mid-air because I don't trust him not to do something stupid if he panics. But once the wheels touch the ground, that plane is mine again. And I want Robert Halloway standing there to meet it." "Understood, Dr. Vance. We are mobilizing now." Angela hung up. She checked her watch. 1 hour and 45 minutes left. She lay back on the bed and closed her eyes. The sound of raucous laughter filtered through the door. "Laugh while you can, boys," she thought, "because the bill is coming due." An hour later, the dynamic in the cabin shifted. Julian and Bradley, bored with their drinking, had come up with a brilliant idea. They wanted to change plans. Why go to cold, snowy New York when they could go to Miami? "Hey, Captain," Julian shouted toward the open cockpit door. Thorne had left it open, a violation of protocol, to chat with the guys. Thorne turned around in his seat. "What can I do for you, Mr. Sterling?" "Change of plans, buddy. Take us to Miami. South Beach calls, we'll cover the extra fuel costs." Thorne hesitated. This was tricky. Rerouting a flight required a new flight plan, fuel calculations, and most importantly, owner approval. The charter agreement was specific to Teterboro. Any deviation costing more than $10,000 required the signature of the account holder. "I'd love to, Mr. Sterling. Thorne said, putting the plane on autopilot and unbuckling to come back into the cabin. But I need authorization. Doctor, Vance, the owner, is very strict about fleet usage. I need her verbal confirmation for a reroute. So call her, Bradley said, checking his phone. I don't have her number. I thought she was meeting us there. She is, Thorne said. But I can call her private line from the sat phone. She usually answers for me. Thorne picked up the cabin handset near the galley, the same system Angela had used earlier. He looked at Sarah. Clear the table, we're going to Miami. Sarah looked pale. Captain, we don't have catering for Miami, and the passenger in the back. Screw the passenger in the back, Thorne snapped. If she wants to go to New York, she can buy a Delta ticket when we land in Florida. He dialed the number labeled Owner, Emergency Priority. Thorne held the phone to his ear, putting on his best, charming pilot face for the voice he expected to hear on the other end. He leaned against the bulkhead, looking at Julian and Bradley with a thumbs up. Ringing now, gentlemen? Brrr, ring. Brrr, ring. The sound of a ringing phone echoed. Thorne frowned. It sounded loud, very loud. It wasn't coming from the earpiece. It was coming from the back of the plane. Brrr, ring. Brrr, ring. Julian looked around, confused. Is that my phone? No, Bradley said. It's coming from the bedroom. Thorne lowered the handset, slowly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Why would the owner's phone be ringing inside the plane? Dr. Vance was in San Francisco, or New York. The bedroom door clicked. Slowly it swung open. Angela stood there. She had taken off the oversized parka. She was wearing a tailored blazer now, which she had pulled from her bag, and she had let her hair down. It framed her face, but in a halo of dark curls. In her hand, she held a sleek black satellite phone. It was flashing red. Brrr, ring. Thorne stared at her. He looked at the handset in his own hand, then at the phone in hers. No, he whispered. No way. Angela pressed the green button on her phone. She held it to her ear, her eyes locking onto Thorne's with the intensity of a laser sight. Hello, Captain. She spoke into her phone. Thorne heard her voice twice. Once from the woman standing 20 feet away, and once crystal clear through the earpiece pressed against his head. This is Dr. Vance, Angela said. The blood drained from Davis Thorne's face so fast, he looked like a wax figure. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The handset slipped from his sweaty palm and dangled by its cord, swinging like a pendulum. Julian Sterling dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one noticed. You, Thorne stammered, his voice cracking. But you're just the... Angela walked forward. Every step was a hammer blow to Thorne's ego. She walked past the stunned venture capitalists, past the terrified Sarah, until she stood toe-to-toe with the man who had tried to humiliate her for 4 hours. I'm just the what, Captain? Angela asked softly. The catering staff, the cleaning lady, the diversity hire. She reached out and took the dangling handset. She hung it up on the cradle with a definitive click. I am Dr. Angela Vance, she announced, her voice filling the cabin. Founder and CEO of Helix Dynamics, and the sole owner of this aircraft. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. But, Bradley Croft squeaked from his seat, we were told the owner was sending a proxy. I am the proxy, Angela said, glancing at them with disdain. I wanted to see how you treated my team when you thought no one important was watching, and I certainly found out. She turned her attention back to Thorne. He was trembling. The realization of what he had done, the insults, the banishment, the threats was crashing down on him. Dr. Vance. Thorne started, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. I had no idea. It was a misunderstanding. Security. The way you were dressed. I was just trying to protect the asset. Protect the asset? Angela laughed, a cold, sharp sound. You let these men smoke in my cabin. You threatened to dump me in Kansas City. You treated me with less respect than you would treat a piece of luggage. I can explain, Thorne pleaded. Please let's talk about this privately. No, Angela said. We are done talking. You have a job to do, Captain. You are going to fly this plane to Teterboro. You are not diverting to Miami. You are not making any more announcements. You are going to go back into that cockpit, sit down and fly the plane. Because if you say one more word to me that isn't yes, ma'am, I will revoke your type rating authorization, effective immediately, and you will never sit in a cockpit again. Thorne looked like he wanted to vomit. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Go, she commanded, pointing to the cockpit. Thorne scrambled backward, practically tripping over his own feet to get away from her gaze. He slammed the cockpit door shut, hiding in his hole. Angela turned to Julian and Bradley. The two men were shrinking into their leather seats, looking like naughty schoolboys caught by the principal. As for you two, Angela said, smoothing her blazer, I believe you wanted to discuss the investment potential of Helix Dynamics. Dr. Vance, Julian stammered, his face bright red. We were just joking earlier. Just blowing off steam. Save it, Angela said. The meeting is cancelled. Helix Dynamics does not partner with people who lack basic human decency. When we land, you will retrieve your own bags. You will find your own ride into the city, and you will never contact my company again. But the deal is worth millions, Bradley cried. I have billions, Mr. Croft. Angela said, sitting down in the principal seat, the seat Thorne had kicked her out of. She pressed the button on the armrest, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soothing blue. I don't need your money. And right now I don't want to hear your voices. She looked at Sarah, who was staring at her with wide, adoring eyes. Sarah. Yes, Dr. Vance. Sarah chirped, standing up straighter than she ever had. I'd like that sparkling water now, and bring a glass of the Dom Perignon. I think I finally have something to celebrate. Right away, ma'am. Angela settled back into the soft leather, watching the lights of cities far below drift by. The cockpit was silent. The guests were terrified. But the ride wasn't over. The plane still had to land. And Angela knew that the real show was going to happen on the tarmac. The descent into Teterboro Teb is usually a busy, high-stress affair for pilots navigating the crowded New York airspace. But for Captain Davis Thorne, the radio chatter of air traffic control was nothing compared to the deafening silence coming from the cabin behind him. His hands, usually steady, as rocks were slick with sweat inside his leather gloves. He gripped the yoke of the Global 7500, his knuckles white. Teterboro Tower, Global 880 Echo Victor, inbound on the ILS runway 19. Thorne's voice wavered slightly over the radio. 0 Echo Victor cleared to land, runway 19. Caution, wake turbulence, the controller replied. Next to him, the first officer, a quiet man named David, who had been intimidated into silence by Thorne for months, dared to speak. Captain, we have a request from ground control. They want us to taxi to a remote stand near Hangar 4. Not the usual gate. Thorne swallowed hard. A remote stand. That meant isolation. That meant privacy. That meant they didn't want witnesses for what was about to happen. Roger, Thorne whispered. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was funereal. Julian and Bradley sat in stone-faced silence. Their earlier bravado had evaporated the moment they realized the woman they had mocked held the keys to their financial future. They were no longer sipping champagne. They were staring out the window, dreading the moment the door opened. Angela sat in the principal seat, reviewing the termination clauses in the flight crew contract on her iPad. She wasn't angry anymore. She was surgical. She was dissecting the cancer that had infected her asset. Sarah walked by, collecting the glasses. She looked terrified that she would be swept up in the purge. Angela caught her eye. "Sarah!" Sarah jumped. "Yes, Dr. Vance. You did a good job today," Angela said, her voice warm. "You tried to de-escalate. You followed protocol. I noticed." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you, Mum. I really need this job." "You won't have this job," Angela said, cryptically, turning back to the window. "Prepare the cabin for landing." The wheels touched down with a screech of rubber on asphalt. The thrust reversers roared, slowing the massive jet. As they taxied off the active runway, Thorne steered the plane not toward the brightly lit FBO entrance, where the limousines usually waited, but toward the dark, cold expanse of Hangar 4. Through the cockpit window, Thorne saw them. 3 black SUVs were parked in a semicircle. Standing in front of the headlights, wrapped in a long wool coat, was Robert Halloway, the CEO of Prestige Aviation Management. Next to him were 2 large men in security uniforms and a woman holding a stack of files. Thorne felt his stomach drop through the floor of the cockpit. Halloway never came out for arrivals. Never. "Parking brake set," Thorne mumbled. "Engines cut." The whine of the turbines died down. The lights of the cabin flickered to full bright. Thorne sat there for a long moment. He didn't want to open the door. As long as the door was closed, he was still the captain. Once it opened, he was just a man who had made the biggest mistake of his life. "Captain," the first officer said softly, "we have to open the door." Thorne nodded numbly. He unbuckled his harness. He stood up, his legs feeling like jelly, and turned to face the cabin. Angela was already standing, her coat draped over her arm. She didn't look at him. She was looking at the door. Thorne rushed past her to get to the door mechanism, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I'll get that, Dr. Vance." "Don't bother," Angela said, stepping around him. "Sarah, open the door, please." Sarah nodded and rotated the heavy handle. The door swung down the stairs, extending to the tarmac. The cold New Jersey air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and judgment. Angela Vance descended the stairs first. As her boots hit the tarmac, Robert Halloway stepped forward. He looked furious, not at her, but on her behalf. "Angela," Robert said, extending a hand. "I got your message. I am mortified. Absolutely mortified." "Hello, Robert," Angela said, calmly shaking his hand. "We have some housekeeping to do." Behind her, Julian and Bradley shuffled down the stairs, looking at their shoes. They tried to sidestep the group and head for the gate, but one of the security guards stepped in their path. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Croft," Angela called out without turning around. The 2 men froze. "Your bags are being unloaded now," Angela said. "Uber pickups are at the main terminal. That's a 2-mile walk. I suggest you start moving. And if I ever see either of your names on a flight manifest for any aircraft I own or charter, I will sue you for trespassing." "Dr. Vance, please." Julian tried one last time. It was just a joke. "Goodbye, gentlemen," she said. They scurried away into the darkness, dragging their carry-ons humiliated and freezing. Then Captain Davis Thorne appeared at the top of the stairs. He adjusted his cap, trying to look authoritative. He walked down, slowly spotting his boss, Robert Halloway. "Mr. Halloway," Thorne said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you. We had a bit of a situation on board. A misunderstanding with the passenger regarding seating protocols. I was just enforcing safety regulations." Halloway stared at him. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. "Captain Thorne," Halloway said, his voice like grinding gravel, "hand me your badge." Thorne froze on the bottom step. "Sir." "Your security badge, your company ID, and the keys to the aircraft." "Robert, listen," Thorne pleaded, stepping onto the tarmac. She didn't identify herself. She looked like a vagrant. I was protecting the company's image. "You judged a book by its cover, Davis," Holloway snapped. "And in doing so, you insulted the woman who pays for that uniform you're wearing. Dr. Vance isn't just a client. She is the largest stakeholder in our fleet expansion program. Or she was until you decided to play God." Thorne turned to Angela. "Dr. Vance, I have 20 years of experience. You can't fire me over a seating dispute." Angela stepped forward, entering the circle of light. "It wasn't a seating dispute, Davis," she said. "It was a character dispute. You treated me with contempt because you thought I was powerless. Then when you found out I had money, you treated me with fear. At no point did you treat me with respect. I don't trust you with my life, and I certainly don't trust you with my plane. Robert." Thorne turned back to his boss, desperate. "I'm the best pilot you have." "You were a pilot," Holloway corrected. "Now you're a liability." The woman with the files stepped forward. She handed Thorne a thick envelope. "Notice of termination. For cause," she said. "Gross misconduct, insubordination, harassment of a client, violation of FAA crew resource management protocols." "You're blacklisting me," Thorne gasped, looking at the papers. This will end my career in private aviation." "You ended your career, Captain," Angela said. "I just signed the paperwork." "Get him off my tarmac," Holloway ordered the security guards. "Wait!" Thorne shouted as the guards grabbed his arms. "I need my flight bag. My logbook is on the plane." "We'll mail it to you," Holloway said. Thorne was dragged toward the terminal, his protests dying out in the cold wind. He looked back one last time at the gleaming jet, the symbol of the status he loved so much. He saw Angela standing there, the wind whipping her hair, looking not like a cleaning lady, but like a titan. Angela turned to Sarah, who was standing by the plane's wheel, shivering. "Sarah," Angela said softly. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah whispered, expecting the worst. "Mr. Holloway," Angela said, "I want Sarah reassigned." Sarah closed her eyes. "Here it comes, the firing." "I'm buying a second Gulfstream next month," Angela continued. "I need a cabin service director to manage the interior staff and train new hires on service standards. Sarah handles pressure with grace. I want her to lead that team. With a commensurate pay raise, of course." Sarah's eyes flew open. "Dr. Vance, Thank you so much. You earned it." Angela smiled. "Now go get warm and take the company car home." For the first 2 weeks, Davis Thorne sat by his phone, waiting for an apology. He was certain that once the hysteria died down, Robert Holloway would realize that firing a chief pilot with 15,000 flight hours over a misunderstanding was a business mistake. Thorne practiced what he would say. He would be gracious, but he would demand a raise for the humiliation. But the phone didn't ring. By the 4th week, the silence wasn't arrogant anymore. It was deafening. The prestigious world of private aviation, which Thorne had ruled like a fiefdom, had closed its ranks. He finally broke down and called Greg Patterson, the director of operations, at a rival charter firm. They had been drinking buddies for a decade. "Greg, it's Davis," Thorne said, forcing a casual tone, though his hand gripped the receiver tightly. "I'm looking to make a move. Prestige and I had a philosophical difference. I'm available." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. "Davis." Greg's voice was hushed, as if he were afraid of being overheard. "Don't do this. Do what I'm offering you, a type-rated captain on a Global 7500. I can save you 40 grand in training costs." "You're radioactive, Davis," Greg said bluntly. The memo went out. It wasn't just a termination. Halloway flagged your file with a "do not hire" notice citing gross misconduct regarding client safety. And it gets worse. Angela Vance sits on the safety board of the National Business Aviation Association. Her husband is on the board of the insurance firm that covers half the fleets in the country. "That's collusion," Thorne shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's consequences," Greg replied. "We heard the cockpit voice recorder transcript Davis. Halloway used it as a case study. We heard how you spoke to her. I can't hire you. I can't even be seen having lunch with you. You're done." The line clicked dead. Thorne stared at the wall, the realization finally piercing his ego. He wasn't just unemployed. He had been erased. The financial collapse was swift and brutal. Thorne had lived his life, leveraged to the hilt the condo in Weehawken. With the skyline view, the designer suits the alimony, the image. 3 months later, he stood behind the blinds of his living room window, watching a tow truck back into his driveway. He wanted to run outside and scream at the man in the high-vis vest hooking chains to his Porsche 911. That car was his identity. It was the physical proof that he was a captain, a man of status. But he couldn't go out there. He couldn't face the neighbors. Behind him, the front door opened. His girlfriend Jessica walked out with 2 suitcases. She didn't say goodbye. She just stepped over the disconnect notice from the electric company that had been slid under the door and walked toward the Uber waiting at the curb. Thorne watched his car disappear around the corner, followed by his girlfriend. He sat on the floor of his empty living room, drinking warm whiskey from a plastic cup, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the only appliance he hadn't pawned yet. 6 months after the incident. The glamour of Aspen and Teterboro was a distant memory. Thorne was now standing in a hangar in rural Ohio that smelled of hydraulic fluid, rotting garbage, and unwashed bodies. "Thorne, move your ass!" The shout came from Buck, the foreman of Pete's Freight and Haul. Buck was a man with a gut that spilled over his belt and zero sympathy for former private jet captains. Thorne wasn't wearing a crisp uniform with gold epaulets. He was wearing a grease-stained jumpsuit with his name written on a piece of masking tape stuck to his chest. I'm going," Thorne grumbled, wiping sweat from his eyes. He was loading crates of frozen chicken parts into the back of a battered Convair 580, a plane that was older than he was. This was the bottom of the aviation barrel. No autopilot, no weather radar, no flight attendants serving caviar. Just night cargo runs to places like Gary, Indiana, and Des Moines, Iowa. "You missed a spot on the intake." Buck spat tobacco juice onto the concrete near Thorne's boots. "Clean it up. We fly at Aero 200, and if you're late again, I'm docking your pay." Thorne grabbed a rag. His hands, once manicured and soft, were covered in calluses and oil. He looked at the rusted hulk of the plane. He wasn't a pilot anymore. He was a truck driver in the sky. July in Scottsdale. Arizona is unforgiving. The tarmac temperature was 115 degrees. Thorne's cargo plane had blown a tire upon landing, and while the mechanics fixed it, Buck had volunteered his crew to help the local FBO with ground handling for the overflow of VIP traffic coming in for a tech summit. "Thorne, get the lav cart," Buck ordered. Thorne froze. The lav cart, the machine used to suck sewage out of airplane toilets. "Buck, come on, I'm a pilot." "You're a ground handler until that tire is fixed," Buck yelled. "Go service the inbound on spot 4. It's a heavy." Thorne dragged the heavy, foul-smelling cart across the scorching tarmac. He pulled his hat low, praying no one would recognize him. As he approached spot 4, a shadow fell over him. He looked up, and his breath hitched. It was a brand-new Bombardier Global 8000. Midnight blue paint, gold pinstripes. It was the most beautiful machine he had ever seen, and there on the tail was the registration N001EV. EV. Angela Vance. The jet came to a stop, the engines winding down with a high-pitched whine that sounded like pure money. The air stairs deployed. Thorne scurried under the fuselage, desperate to hide. He hooked up the sewage hose, his face inches from the service panel. From beneath the wing, he watched the red carpet being rolled out. 2 women descended the stairs. The first was Angela Vance. She looked radiant in a white linen power suit, laughing into her phone. Yes, the acquisition is complete. Tell the board the new pilot scholarship fund is fully endowed. Following her was a woman in a sharp navy dress, holding a clipboard and wearing a headset. She moved with authority, directing the baggage handlers. It was Sarah, the flight attendant he had bullied, the woman he had threatened to fire. She wasn't terrified anymore. She was the cabin service director. "Careful with those crates," Sarah commanded. "Those are prototypes. Handle with care." Suddenly Sarah stopped. She looked toward the wing. She looked right at the dirty, sweating man crouching by the sewage port. Thorne held his breath. "Please don't see me." But she did. Sarah walked over to the wing, her heels clicking on the tarmac. Thorne couldn't look away. He felt naked in his shame. "Hello, Davis," she said softly. Thorne tried to stand, but his knees cracked. He wiped his greasy hands on his pants. "Sarah, I'm just helping out. Between contracts, you know." It was a pathetic lie. They both knew it. Sarah didn't mock him. She didn't laugh. She looked at him with a profound, crushing pity. She reached into her expensive tote bag and pulled out a bottle of Voss water, cold, beaded with condensation. The same water he used to demand she serve him on a silver tray. "It's hot out here," she said, extending the bottle. "Stay hydrated, Davis." Thorne took the water with a trembling hand. "Thanks." "Sarah," Angela called from the waiting limousine. "We're late." "Coming, Dr. Vance," Sarah called back. She looked at Thorne one last time. "Take care of yourself." She turned and walked away, getting into the air-conditioned limo next to the billionaire. The door slammed shut, sealing them in a world Thorne would never touch again. That night, alone, in a Motel 6 room that smelled of stale smoke, Thorne lay on the lumpy mattress. He couldn't sleep. The image of Sarah's pity was burned into his mind. He pulled out his phone and aimlessly scrolled through aviation news. A headline caught his eye. "Helix Dynamics partners with flight safety to launch the Thorne Initiative." Thorne sat up straight. Thorne Initiative. Had they named a scholarship after him? Was this a redemption arc? A flicker of hope sparked in his chest. He clicked the video link. Angela Vance stood at a podium, flashbulbs popping. "Arrogance in the cockpit is a safety hazard," Angela told the press. "When a pilot judges a passenger or crew member based on appearance or bias, they compromise the flight. We saw this firsthand last Christmas." The camera zoomed in on her face. "That is why we are launching the Thorne Initiative," she continued. "It is a mandatory training curriculum for all private aviation crews. It uses real-world examples of leadership failures to teach pilots how not to behave." Thorne dropped the phone on the bedsheets. They hadn't named a building after him. They hadn't honored him. They had made him the cautionary tale. He was the textbook example of failure. Every pilot in the country, every young cadet, every veteran captain would sit in a classroom and watch a video about him. They would listen to his voice recordings. They would dissect his mistakes. They would laugh at his bias. Davis Thorne rolled over, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The air conditioner rattled, struggling against the heat, but he felt freezing cold. He had spent his whole life wanting to be a legend of the sky, and now he finally was, just not the kind he wanted to be. Davis Thorne learned the hard way. that stripes on a shoulder don't make a man character does. He spent 20 years climbing the ladder only to kick it out from under himself in 5 minutes of arrogance. He judged a book by its cover, and in the end, he became the chapter everyone skips. Angela Vance didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that the person you treat like the help today might be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a daily dose of karma. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to always be kind.